The water from the shower had hit my back with enough force to wash away the soot and smoke, but not the memory of today's fire. 3 kids nearly didn't make it out of that house on Maple Street. I closed my eyes, letting the scalding water run down my face, trying to push away the image of their terrified expressions when I carried them out one by one. Saving lives never got old. But the fear in those little eyes, that part still haunted me. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear Eliza come home. It wasn't until I stepped out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around my waist, that I noticed her sitting on our bed scrolling through her phone with an unusual intensity. The lamplight cast a soft glow on her auburn hair, a sight that usually brought a sense of peace to the chaotic corners of my mind. Tonight, it just felt distant. Her fingers moved quickly, a blur of motion across the glass screen. I caught a glimpse of what looked like a text conversation before she quickly flipped the phone face down on the duvet as I approached. "Hey," I said, my voice still rough from inhaling smoke. I leaned down to kiss her. She flinched, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but I felt it like a static shock. She quickly locked her screen before turning her cheek to me. "Caleb, you startled me." That was the 3rd time this week I'd caught her guarding her phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. Something was off, but between my 48-hour shifts at the station and the endless minutia of wedding planning, I hadn't had the mental bandwidth to address it. I'd chalked it up to stress, the kind that came with choosing floral arrangements and finalizing guest lists. "Rough day?" she asked, her eyes not quite meeting mine. There was a nervous edge to her voice I hadn't heard before, thin and brittle. "Yeah. House fire on Maple. Got everyone out, but it was close." I pulled on a pair of jeans and a clean t-shirt, watching her reflection in the closet mirror as I dressed. Her eyes kept darting to her phone, lying dormant on the bed. "The youngest was maybe 4, I continued, trying to bridge the strange new distance between us. "Reminded me of your student, Tommy, the one with the dinosaur obsession." Usually, that would have made her smile, would have launched her into an animated story about her 2nd graders at Asheville Elementary. Her face would light up as she recounted their latest antics. Instead, she just nodded distractedly, a vague, empty gesture. "How are the Rugrats today?" I pressed, a sinking feeling growing in my stomach. Lately, she'd been strangely subdued about work. The vibrant teacher who used to fill our evenings with hilarious classroom anecdotes had been replaced by someone quiet and withdrawn. "Fine," she said, her voice flat. "Nothing special." She stood up abruptly, almost knocking over the bedside lamp. "I'm going to take a bath." Before I could respond, she had grabbed her phone and disappeared into the bathroom. The click of the lock echoed in our bedroom like a gunshot. I sat on the edge of the bed, a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't Eliza, not my Eliza. Not the woman who used to curl up next to me after rough shifts, her head on my chest, listening for hours while I processed the things I'd seen. This wasn't the woman who'd proposed to me after our hike up to Looking Glass Rock last year, getting down on one knee with a vintage watch instead of a ring, because she knew I'd appreciate the symbolism of time spent together more than diamonds. "To all the time we have left," she had said, her eyes shining with a sincerity that felt unshakable. I glanced at the bathroom door, hearing the water running, and then, faintly, I heard the sound of her voice, low and murmuring. She was on the phone. In the bathroom, with the door locked, something had changed, and as much as I wanted to attribute it to wedding stress, my gut, the same instinct that told me when a floor was about to give way or a wall was about to collapse, told me it was something more. The question was, did I really want to know what? "Have you talked to her about it?" Finn asked, handing me a beer as we sat on his back deck. The sunset painted the Blue Ridge Mountains in hues of gold and crimson, but I barely noticed. The view that usually calmed my soul felt like a painted backdrop to my inner turmoil. Finn had been my best friend since our rookie days at the fire station. He never sugarcoated anything. He'd been there through my parents' messy divorce, my brother's stint in rehab, the day I nearly died in a warehouse collapse. If anyone would give me the straight talk I needed, it was him. "Every time I try, she changes the subject or says everything's fine," I said, taking a long pull from the bottle. "She's constantly checking her phone, going into other rooms to take calls. Last night, she was texting someone at 2 a.m. "You checked her phone messages?" Finn raised an eyebrow. "Number." I woke up and she was on the balcony, typing away. When I asked who she was talking to, she said it was her mother having an anxiety attack. I shook my head, the memory leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I called her mom the next day to check in. She had no idea what I was talking about. Said she slept like a log. A heavy silence settled between us, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Finn leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, the beer bottle dangling between his fingers. He looked at me, his expression serious. "You think she's cheating?" The word hit me like a sucker punch, making the world tilt momentarily. It was the question I'd been avoiding, the ugly possibility I'd been pushing into the darkest corner of my mind. "I don't know," I whispered, the admission feeling like a betrayal in itself. "I don't want to believe it." "Look, man," Finn said gently but firmly, "Eliza's great, but you need to face this head on. The wedding's in what, 3 months? Better to know now than after you've signed the papers." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The thought of confronting Eliza made my stomach churn with a sickening mix of fear and dread. But the alternative, marrying someone who might be emotionally checked out, living a life of quiet suspicion, was infinitely worse. "What if I'm wrong?" I asked quietly. "What if it's just wedding stress or work stuff, and I come off like a paranoid, controlling asshole?" Finn set his beer down with a decisive thunk. "Then she'll tell you that, you'll talk it through, and you'll both be better for it. But what if you're right? Do you really want to spend the next 40 years wondering every time she takes a call in another room?" The image of that future, a long, drawn-out marriage poisoned by doubt, made my decision clear. "I'll talk to her tonight," I promised, my voice steadier than I felt. But when I got home, Eliza was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. Her phone was tucked under her pillow, its shape just visible in the dim light from the hallway. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her chest, wondering when we had started keeping secrets from each other. For a wild, desperate moment, I considered taking the phone, checking her messages, finding the truth myself. But that wasn't me. That wasn't us. Or at least, it hadn't been. Instead, I slept on the couch. The next morning, I got the text that sealed it. "Dinner tonight, just the two of us. Antonio's at 7 o'clock. We need to talk." Antonio's, the place we'd had our first date, the ghost of our beginning, chosen as the venue for what felt like our end. I arrived 10 minutes early, my hands shaking slightly as I buttoned my shirt at the station. I claimed our usual corner table with the view of the mountains. Old Enzo, the owner, came over personally to pour me a glass of the house red. "Where's your beautiful lady?" he asked, his smile warm. "On her way," I said, hoping it was true. She walked in at 7:05, wearing a dress I didn't recognize and looking more nervous than I had ever seen her. Her hair was styled differently, in soft waves instead of her usual straight cut. It was a look I'd never seen, and the cold realization that she might have changed it for someone else hit me like a physical blow. "You look beautiful," I said as she sat down, because despite everything she did, "Thanks." She fidgeted with her napkin, not meeting my eyes. I noticed her wrist was bare. She wasn't wearing her engagement watch. We ordered wine, and Eliza took a large gulp as soon as it arrived. The waiter had barely left our table when she blurted out, "Julian is back in town." The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. Julian Hamilton. Her college boyfriend, the one she'd dated for 4 years. The one she'd once described as the wild ride that eventually crashed. "Okay," I said carefully, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "And why does that matter?" "He reached out to me a few weeks ago," she began, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass in hypnotic circles, "just to catch up at first. But we've been talking a lot." "Talking," I repeated, my voice tight. "Yes, and meeting up, sometimes for coffee." The room seemed to tilt slightly, the ambient restaurant noise fading to a distant hum. "You've been meeting your ex-boyfriend for coffee, and you didn't think to mention that to your fiancé?" "I didn't know how to tell you. I knew you'd be upset." "I'm upset because you hid it, Eliza, not because you had coffee with someone." Even as I said it, I knew it was a half-truth. The secrecy was the poison, but the thought of her reconnecting with him was its own special kind of torture. She took another drink, then finally looked me directly in the eyes. "There's more to it, Caleb." The waiter approached with bread, but I waved him off so violently he nearly dropped the basket. "What more?" "Being around Julian again, it's brought up a lot of feelings. Feelings I thought were gone." Her words tumbled out faster now, as if she'd rehearsed this speech, but was now rushing through it. "With him, I feel this passion, this excitement, like life is an adventure." I sat perfectly still while my world collapsed inward like a dying star. "And with me," I supplied, my voice surprisingly steady, "it's safe and secure." "And boring," she added, her voice barely a whisper. Then, as if realizing her mistake, she quickly corrected herself. Not boring, just predictable, comfortable. She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled back as if her touch might burn me. Caleb, I love you. I do. But seeing Julian again has made me wonder if I settled too soon. If I gave up on something electric for something reliable. The man I was, the firefighter, the rescuer, vanished. In his place was a man being told he was a sensible sedan while his fiancée test drove a sports car. So, what are you saying exactly? I needed her to spell it out. I don't know. Tears welled in her eyes, making them shine in the candlelight. I'm confused. A cold clarity settled over me. Let me make this simple for you, Eliza. If you think he's the adventure you need, the door is wide open. But you don't get to keep me as your safety net while you figure it out. That's not fair, she protested. No, what's not fair is hiding your coffee dates for weeks. What's not fair is telling your fiancé that another man makes you feel more alive. My voice remained low, but it had an edge I barely recognized. I deserve better than to be your backup plan. You're twisting my words. Am I? I placed my napkin on the table and signaled for the check. I think we're done here. Caleb, please, she begged. Can we just talk about this? Your honesty is a few weeks too late, I said, placing my credit card on the tray. So here's some honesty from me. If he's what you want, go get him. But not from my house. And not while wearing a watch I thought symbolized our time together. Her face crumpled. Are you breaking up with me? I'm giving you what you asked for, I said, standing up. The freedom to find out if the grass is greener with Julian, but I won't be waiting around to see how that works out for you. As I walked away, I heard her call my name, her voice breaking. I didn't turn around. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. The hostess caught my eye. Everything okay, sir? No, I answered honestly, but it will be. The news spread through our small community like wildfire. By noon the next day, it seemed everyone knew that Caleb Thomas and Eliza Bennett were no longer getting married. The story varied depending on who was telling it. Some said I'd caught her cheating. Others claimed we'd had a dramatic public breakup at Antonio's NEO6. I ignored the calls and texts, focusing instead on the practical, brutal mechanics of dismantling a life built for two. I contacted the venue, the caterer, the photographer, the bakery. Each cancellation was another nail in the coffin of the future I'd thought was mine. Each conversation, filled with awkward condolences and questions about non-refundable deposits, chipped away at my composure. You sure you don't want to wait a few days? Finn asked as I hung up with the bakery. He was sitting on my couch, the couch I now slept on, a silent, supportive presence in the wreckage of my home. Give yourself time to cool off. Maybe talk it through. There's nothing to talk through, I said, deleting the wedding planning app from my phone with a decisive swipe. The icon vanished. She's not sure about us. That's all I need to know. People get cold feet, man. It happens. I looked up at him, feeling 10 years older than I had 2 days ago. This isn't cold feet, Finn. Cold feet is being nervous about the ceremony. This is actively auditioning your ex-boyfriend for the lead role in your life while your fiancé is still on stage. That's not something you work through with a heart-to-heart and a good night's sleep. Finn couldn't argue with that. He just handed me another beer and sat quietly beside me as I methodically erased the life we had spent months making. My phone rang again. Eliza. For the 12th time, I let it go to voicemail. You should talk to her eventually, Finn said gently, even if it's just to get closure. I have closure, I said, staring at her name on my screen. She wanted to explore her options, and now she's free to do so. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. We had a house full of shared possessions, 5 years of entangled lives. Breaking up wasn't as simple as walking out of a restaurant. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Chloe, Eliza's best friend. I hesitated, then answered. Caleb, what the hell? Chloe's voice was sharp with accusation. Eliza's a mess. She says you broke up with her at Antonio's and kicked her out. That's one version of the story, I said, a fresh wave of anger washing over me. Did she happen to tell you why? She said you overreacted to her being honest about some feelings she was having. I laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. Yeah, feelings for her ex-boyfriend Julian, that she's been secretly meeting for weeks. Feelings that made her wonder if being with me was a mistake. Did she mention that part? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Oh, Chloe said, her voice significantly softer. Number, she didn't mention that part. Somehow, I'm not surprised. I'm sorry, Caleb, she said, and she sounded genuine. That's messed up. The validation, coming from Eliza's own best friend, was a small, cold comfort. After we hung up, I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, the silence of the house pressing in on me. That evening, Eliza came by to get her things. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. I had just finished a shift and was bone-tired, in no state for another emotional confrontation. Chloe was with her, looking uncomfortable but determined, a reluctant peacekeeper. I've packed most of your clothes and personal items, I told Eliza, my voice flat as I pointed to the boxes stacked in the living room. Take whatever else is yours. Caleb, please. Can we just talk? She pleaded, following me into the kitchen as I made coffee, desperate for the caffeine to keep me upright. We talked yesterday. You made yourself pretty clear. No, I didn't. I was confused, and I expressed it badly. I don't want to lose you. But you're not sure you want to keep me either, I countered, the logic of it sharp and painful. That's the problem, Eliza. I was sure about you. You're not sure about me. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted beyond the physical. Love shouldn't be a pros and cons list, Eliza. You shouldn't have to weigh being with me against being with someone else. If you have to, I've already lost. Her framing of the situation made anger flare hot in my chest. A moment of doubt? You've been secretly meeting your ex for weeks, hiding your phone, lying to my face about where you've been. Then you sit across from me and tell me he makes you feel alive in ways I don't. That is not a moment of doubt, Eliza. That is a betrayal. I never slept with him. You didn't have to, I shot back, my voice low and shaking. The bottom line is, I will not be someone's second choice or safety net. I deserve better than that. She started to cry again, silent tears tracking through her makeup. Despite everything, a traitorous part of me wanted to comfort her, to pull her into my arms like I had 100 times before. But I couldn't. That would only muddy the waters. I need you to go now, I said, my voice hardening. Take your things and leave your key. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. That's not my problem anymore, I said, the words harsher than I intended. Call Julian, call your parents, but you can't stay here. She stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. You're being cruel, she whispered. No, I said, walking to the front door and opening it. I'm being clear. There's a difference. Goodbye, Eliza. It took her an hour to gather her things, with periodic attempts to restart the conversation. I remained firm, helping her load boxes into her car in a tense, suffocating silence. When they finally drove away, I closed the door, slid down against it, and let the dam finally break. The silent, empty house echoed with the sound of my own grief. The next few weeks were a blur of work, awkward encounters around town, and long, sleepless nights. The house felt cavernous without her, filled with the ghosts of what had been. I'd catch myself reaching for her in bed, forgetting for a half second upon waking that she was gone. I started sleeping on the couch, unable to face the emptiness of my bed. Work became my salvation and my poison. I volunteered for the toughest calls, the longest shifts. I threw myself into danger with a reckless abandon that bordered on self-destruction. If the guys noticed my new intensity, they didn't comment until Chief Morrison called me into his office after I'd stayed for a third consecutive 24-hour shift. This stops. Now, Thomas, he said without preamble, his voice leaving no room for argument. You're going to get yourself killed, or worse, get someone else killed, if you keep pushing like this. I'm fine, Chief. You're running from something, and it's affecting your judgment. Yesterday, you went back into that apartment building after I ordered everyone out. There might have been someone still inside, I argued weakly. The thermal scan was clear, and you knew it. You took an unnecessary risk. He leaned forward, his eyes, which had seen 30 years of fire and tragedy, boring into mine. I get it. Your personal life is in shambles. But I will not let you use my firehouse as a place to play out some death wish. His words hit home hard. I don't have a death wish. Then start acting like it. Take some time off. 2 weeks, minimum. Deal with your head, then come back ready to work. It wasn't a suggestion. 2 days into my forced vacation, I was already climbing the walls. Finn found me in my garage at 7 a.m., meticulously dismantling and cleaning every tool I owned. Get dressed, he said, tossing a duffel bag at me. We're going somewhere. I'm busy. You're avoiding, he corrected, There's a difference. He looked around at the neat rows of screwdrivers and wrenches. This isn't healthy, man. He drove us to a cabin tucked deep in the mountains where cell service was a myth, and the only sounds were birdsong and rustling leaves. For 3 days, we hiked, chopped wood, and ate whatever we managed to cook over an open fire. We talked about everything except Eliza, until the last night. As we sat on the porch with beers, staring at the silhouettes of the mountains against a star-dusted sky, Finn finally broke the unspoken truce. "You know what I think?" he said, his voice cutting through the cricket chorus. Eliza panicked. The wedding got real. Commitment got real. And she grabbed the first escape hatch she could find. Julian was just convenient. He was the road not taken. Maybe, I conceded, the idea a strange comfort. But that doesn't make it hurt any less. No, it doesn't, he agreed. But it does mean it wasn't about you being inadequate. It was about her being afraid. His words addressed a deep-seated doubt I hadn't even admitted to myself. Returning to town, I felt lighter, more grounded. The frantic energy had dissipated, replaced by a quiet resolve. A week later, my crew was called to a multi-car pileup on the interstate. It was chaos, twisted metal, shattering glass, the smell of gasoline sharp in the air. Amidst the frantic work of freeing a trapped driver, I found myself working alongside a trauma nurse from the first response team. She moved with a calm, efficient grace that was mesmerizing in the middle of the carnage. Her red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was smudged with dirt, but her eyes were sharp and focused. When a sudden shift in the wreckage sent a piece of metal tumbling toward me, she reacted instantly, pulling me back a half step just before it clattered to the asphalt where I'd been standing. "Watch yourself, fireman," she said, her voice steady, without a trace of panic. Later, after the scene was cleared and the last ambulance had departed, I saw her sitting on the bumper of a fire truck, cleaning a cut on her arm. "Thanks for the save back there," I said, walking over. She looked up, a small, tired smile touching her lips. "All in a day's work. You guys did the hard part." "Caleb," I said, offering a hand. "Rowan," she replied, her handshake firm. "Well, Caleb, try not to get crushed before I see you at the next one." It was a brief, professional exchange, but as I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A flicker of interest, a glimmer of light in the long, dark tunnel. I didn't think I'd see Rowan again outside of a disaster scene, but a few days later, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown. She was off duty, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater, looking startlingly different without the adrenaline and grim backdrop of an accident. "Fireman," she greeted me with a wry smile. "Keeping out of trouble?" Trying my best, I grinned back. "Can I buy you a coffee?" As a thank you for keeping my head attached to my shoulders. One coffee turned into two, and 2 hours of conversation that felt like 20 minutes. She was different from anyone I'd ever dated. Direct, independent, with a dark sense of humor shaped by years in emergency medicine. She didn't play games or make me guess what she was thinking. On our third date over beers at a local brewery, she looked at me bluntly. "I like you, Caleb, but I should warn you. I work crazy hours, I'm not great at texting back, and I snore when I'm really tired." I laughed, charmed by her honesty. "I work 48-hour shifts. I sometimes wake up screaming from fire nightmares, and I'm still getting over a really bad breakup." "Sounds like we're both disasters," she said, raising her glass. "To damaged goods," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. "To starting over." Our relationship grew slowly, organically. It was built on shared experiences in high-stress jobs and a mutual understanding of the need for space and honesty. With her, I didn't feel predictable or boring. I felt seen. Life settled into a new, better routine. I repainted the house, bought new furniture, and reclaimed spaces that had been ours and made them mine. I was building a life that didn't include Eliza, and to my surprise, it was a good life. Then, 4 months after our breakup, the rumors started. Julian, the exciting adventure, had been offered a job in Atlanta. The Asheville gossip mill, which I tried my best to ignore, churned out the details. He hadn't asked Eliza to go with him. It wasn't my problem, I told myself firmly. But a week later, it became my problem when she showed up at my door. It was a rainy Tuesday night. I was cooking dinner, music playing softly in the kitchen, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Eliza standing on my porch, drenched and shivering, mascara streaked down her face. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. I didn't invite her in. "Can I please come in? Just for a minute?" Her voice was thick with tears. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, her eyes darting around at the changes I'd made. The new couch, the rearranged furniture, my hiking photos replacing the generic art she had preferred. "You've redecorated," she observed quietly. "I've moved on," I corrected. "Why are you here, Eliza?" She sat on the edge of the new couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Julian is moving to Atlanta." "So I heard. He didn't ask me to go with him." Her voice broke. "He said it was fun while it lasted, but he's not looking for anything serious right now." The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so predictable. "And you're telling me this because—" She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. "Because I made a terrible mistake, Caleb. I threw away something real and precious for a fantasy that turned out to be exactly what it was 5 years ago. A toxic mess." I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed. "That's unfortunate, but it's not my concern anymore." "Caleb, please," she begged, standing and moving toward me. "I know I hurt you, and I am so sorry. But what we had was special. We could try again." "Number." The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. "We can't try again, Eliza. That's not how this works." "Why not? People make mistakes. They learn from them and grow." "Because I deserve to be someone's first choice," I said simply, the words coming from a place of hard-won self-respect, not the safe option they come back to when the exciting one dumps them. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's honest." I stepped back as she reached for my hand. "I am sorry you're hurting, Eliza. I truly am. But I can't be your backup plan." "You're not. I love you. I never stopped." "Then let me ask you this," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "If Julian had asked you to go to Atlanta, would you be standing in my living room right now?" She couldn't answer. Her silence was the only confirmation I needed. It was the sound of the final nail being hammered into the coffin. "I think you should go," I said gently. "Goodbye, Eliza." This time when she left, I felt no urge to break down. Instead, there was only a profound sense of closure, and surprisingly, a wave of immense relief. The ghost had finally been laid to rest. I thought that would be the end of it, but Eliza seemed determined to rewrite our final chapter. For the next month, she engaged in a campaign to win me back, showing up at places she knew I'd be, sending long, rambling letters, leaving tearful voicemails. It went from sad to annoying to concerning. The situation came to a head at a charity fundraiser the department was hosting. I was there with a few of the guys from the station when Eliza approached, her movements unsteady. She'd clearly been drinking. "Caleb, you have to talk to me," she said loudly, grabbing my arm and drawing the attention of several of my colleagues. "You can't just throw away 5 years." "Eliza, you're making a scene," I said quietly, trying to steer her toward the door. "It's because of her, isn't it?" she slurred, her face hardening. "I've seen you around town with that nurse, the redhead." Before I could respond, Chief Morrison appeared at my side. "Miss Bennett, I think you've had too much to drink. Let me call you a cab." Finn gently but firmly took her arm and led her away despite her protests. The incident was embarrassing, but it was also a turning point. After that public meltdown, the stalking behavior stopped. I heard through Chloe that she'd finally started therapy. Meanwhile, my casual coffee meetings with Rowan had evolved into something real and meaningful. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, I told her everything about Eliza. She listened without judgment, her hand resting on mine. "That sounds incredibly painful," she said when I finished. "But it also sounds like you handled it with a hell of a lot more grace than she deserved." Her validation was a balm on a wound I didn't realize was still tender. My birthday rolled around in November, 7 months after the breakup. I'd planned a small gathering at my place, just a few friends, good food, nothing elaborate. Rowan arrived early to help, her presence in my kitchen feeling both novel and completely right. The doorbell rang as I was setting up the grill on the back deck. "Can you get that?" I called to Rowan. "It's probably Finn with the ice." A moment later, she appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. "It's not Finn." I turned to see Eliza standing behind her, clutching a wrapped package. She looked completely thrown by Rowan's presence. "Eliza," I said, surprise evident in my voice. "What are you doing here?" "It's your birthday," she said, as if that explained everything. Her eyes darted between Rowan and me. "I didn't realize you had company." "I'm Rowan," Rowan said, extending a hand with professional courtesy, though her eyes were cool. "Caleb's girlfriend." The word hung in the air. We hadn't officially labeled it yet, But in that moment, I was profoundly grateful for her clarity. Eliza's face fell slightly. Nice to meet you. I'm Eliza, an old friend. The revision of our history made me clench my jaw, but I let it pass. Did you need something specific, Eliza? I just wanted to drop this off, she said, thrusting the package toward me. And maybe talk for a minute, privately. Rowan gave my arm a gentle squeeze. I'll finish setting up inside. Once we were alone, Eliza's composure cracked. You're dating someone new? Already? It's been over half a year, I pointed out, and yes, I thought, maybe with some time, you might reconsider. There's nothing to reconsider, Eliza, I said, my voice gentle but final. So that's it? 5 years together, and you can just replace me that easily? The accusation sparked a flash of anger. Replace you? This isn't about replacing you. This is about moving on. It's what healthy people do when a relationship ends. You made a choice, and that choice had consequences. One of which is that we are no longer together. Tears filled her eyes. I still love you, Caleb. This isn't about love anymore, I said, softening slightly. It's about trust and respect, and those things are gone. I think you should leave before my guests arrive. She lingered for a moment, then finally turned and walked away. Rowan emerged from the house once her car had pulled away. You okay? Yeah, I said, and I meant it. Actually, I am. I looked at the unopened gift in my hands, then set it aside. It's part of a closed chapter. Later that night, long after our friends had left and Rowan had fallen asleep in my bed, curiosity won out. I carefully removed the wrapping paper. Inside was a handcrafted photo album filled with pictures from our 5 years together. On the last page was a handwritten letter detailing all the reasons she regretted her choices. It was emotional, raw, and completely sincere, and it moved me not at all. I closed the album and placed it in a box in the back of my closet. Not out of anger, but because those memories belonged to a different man living a different life. A life I had grieved and fully moved beyond. 6 months later, I sold the house. Rowan and I found a place closer to both our workplaces, with a view of the mountains and enough space for her books and my hiking gear. The kitchen needed updating and the deck was weathered, but it was ours. A fresh start. I heard through the grapevine that Eliza eventually moved to Charlotte for a new teaching position and was dating someone new. I hoped she had found her own kind of peace. Sometimes, when people who knew the old story asked if I ever regretted how things ended, my answer was always the same. The only thing I regret is not ending it sooner. Lying in our new bed, with Rowan's steady breathing, a quiet rhythm beside me, I would look out the window at the endless, open sky over the mountains and feel nothing but gratitude. The fires of the past had been extinguished, and in their place, something new and strong had been given the space to grow.